Well, again, as I told Heather, I appreciate the opportunity to do this tonight. And what I've got planned for you is, well, the main part of the presentation has to do with my, I won't say my favorite DXpeditions, but let's just call them my most memorable DXpedition. But I think it was, I guess it was Heather. Somebody said that you all would like to hear an update on what happened on the Bouvet 3Y0X aborted DXpedition. So I've got some slides on that, and I want to talk about that first, and then we'll get down to the fun stuff. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the background here. I understand there may be a 13-year-old guest with us today. This picture of me back in Birmingham, Alabama in 1958, I was 14 years old. And what really got me hooked on DX and DXing, or particularly being on the other side of the pileup, was the 2 years that I spent in Okinawa. Dad was stationed there, 60 to 62. My call was KR6LY. And you can see the DX40 and the R100 and the crew cut. But that's where I got hooked. We're going to talk a little about DXpeditions of the years, because one of the presentations that I do is called highlights of 11 top 10 DXpeditions or DXpeditions. In other words, I've got 11 top teners to my credit, and the credit of the teams, of course. And people say, well, that math doesn't add up exactly. I said, but you know, when you make a lot of QSOs and a top tenor, then it drops out of the top 10 and something comes up and replaces it. I don't know if you all have ever had a chance to see a DXpedition of the Year award. This is one that from Southwest Ohio DX Association. These are the folks that sponsor Dayton. And here's a list of the DXpeditions of the year. It all started back in 1993 with Allen Island. And that was ranked number 8. Then a few years later, BK0IR, and then A52A, ranked number 3, and then South Sandwich and South Georgia. And then Peter 1, that's one of the ones we'll talk about today, Peter 1. BU7RG was number 2 at the time. Desiceo, that's another one we're going to talk about today. And then you'll remember 10-10-10, when a number of the Caribbean entities became, for one way or another, became kind of independent. And we activated PJ6A for an all-time new one. The FT5ZM was in 2014. It was number 4. And that's another one we'll talk about today. And then Navassa, when we activated that in 2015, that was ranked number 2. And each of these got the Expedition of the Year at the Dayton Handpinch. That's what the rigs look like now. And there should be another picture in here, but that's what I look like now. That was taken when we were just departing Valpello, HK0NA, which is not one I've got here to talk about. But anyway, let's start with the elephant in the room. Bouvet 3Y0X. This was 2018, and we thought we were ready. We thought we had taken care of all of the small details that have to be taken care of. and we were going to kind of get on the island, use helicopters, a big boat, and make 200,000 QSOs. Didn't quite work out that way. But it's nice to know that we were close. So close we could almost touch her, but it just wasn't to be. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Apollo 13 mission. There are some similarities because we had had a long string of successes. Maybe we were due for a failure. H1A, well, I've just listed them for you. But anyway, I would point out that 3Y0X down there on the left-hand side, you'll see there were 2 attempts. It took 2 attempts to get that one done. So I guess we were set up for failure. There's the team. This is a famous statue down in Punta Arenas, Chile, which was our departure point. An international team. I think we had 22 people on the team. And of course, we spent the first 4 or 5 days in planning sessions. And here we are getting familiarized with the boat and the layout. And then, of course, there was this kind of training that was hopefully not going to be required or needed, but was certainly necessary to do and get everybody ready. Learning the proper way to use zodiacs and so on, also very, very important. And then some experiences with the gummy, they call them gummy suits, GUMMY. That's kind of the sailors. That's the sailors' nickname for them. And I think this is what they used on the recent successful expedition. This is how they got ashore and got back to the boat. Here's a good shot. I like this particular shot. This is the Betanzos, which is a Chilean ship, and you can see that we had 2 helicopters, and this picture shows that pretty well. And of course, what we were preparing for was 31 days at sea. And it was all in the Southern Ocean. I'll show you some pictures of some of the things that we've passed, but it's tough. That's a tough, but here we are on the boat. We had a call sign on the boat and 2 stations. And we made 10,000 contacts, which is a lot. Everybody probably made, I think I made about 600. I think the least I saw on the list was about 100 QSOs. But that was fun. That kept us busy because, again, we had 31 days to kill. Nice accommodations, either 2 or 3 men to a room. And this is a 14 AVQ mounted on the bow, and of course, right above the water, and it was just one heck of a good antenna. I've used that a number of times. And that's the first iceberg we saw, first of many, I might add. And here we are offshore Bouvet. And you can see that there is a rapidly changing weather pattern. Here we are. This 5 minutes ago was in complete sunshine. Sorry, and now you can see there's a rainstorm and it's cloudy and not flying weather. So we spent 3 days at the island. One of the things we did was go down into the hold and practice erecting shelters. We held daily meetings with the helo pilots, and it was obvious pretty quickly that they were spooked. Spooked by the weather, spooked by the infrequent and short flying windows, and I think they were spooked by the large amount of stuff we had to get ashore. 14 radios and amps, antennas, masts, 8 6,500 kW gensets, 5 shelters, 23 men, food, water, gas, and personal gear. To say nothing of the weather and the wind and the roll of the boat. And this is a picture that was taken, and I think probably says an awful lot. The man on the left with the beard is the representative of DAP. And DAP was a company that we had used to go to Peter 1. And we convinced him to go with us and kind of be our interpreter and organizer for. This is a guy who has crisscrossed Antarctica 3 or 4 times, single-handedly. The two on the right, you can tell by the look on their faces, were the pilots, and they do look a little spooked, don't they? All right, so we modified the plan, reduced the size and scope of the planned operation, reduced the amount of stuff going ashore, and adopted the MVC approach, which is what we used on the Navassa the following year. MVC is minimum viable configuration. We would stage on and stage off. If we could fly 1 flight or 2 flights or 3 flights and get stuff ashore, we would do it. And then we would stand down until we got another weather opening. And this was all briefed by Ralph K4UEE, who's one of my good friends and co-leaders. So we were ready to go. Another shot. But then on February 2nd, even though we had difficult weather, we now had a warning that there were, in fact, something coming at else it was going to be even worse. On that day, clouds and fog moved in, winds picked up at sunset, gale force plus winds predicted for the next 4 days. And the concern in terms of the crew and the captain certainly was that the anchors would not hold position. That night, intense storm hit the island and hit us, and we measured 80-mile-an-hour winds. There literally was no place to hide, and you can see that we did change our track and try to get out of the wind. This is where we had been stationed for most of the time. We tried to get down here, that didn't help. Made some other moves, just trying to keep the anchor off the bottom, and just fight the winds with the motors. And that's where we had problems. At 11:45 in the evening, while under power, trying to hold position, the coupling on the starboard engine failed. The passenger cabin was filled with smoke. We donned our life vests and assembled on the deck at the designated spot. We learned that there was no fire, but the rubber coupling had overheated, failed, and caused the smoke. The concern was that if the remaining engine failed, we would not be able to control the boat, might run aground, and there were icebergs in the vicinity. And if the team was on the island and we lost the remaining engine, the extraction would be difficult, if not impossible. So the captain made the only decision he could make, and that was to abort the mission, unable to continue mission safely. So originally we left the island. This would be the island. I'm pointing at it here. Turned around and headed back to the west, 2,700 miles. And we're against the waves and against the wind. And what we found is that in about 48 hours, we only went about 60 miles. So the other option was to go to Cape Town. So we turned around and went to Cape Town, and 10 days later, we landed there. And one of the first things we saw was a boat greeting us with a number of the local ZS hams on board. And it was kind of a greeting party, and then they threw a big party for us. And we took some more pictures. This particular 3Y0Z banner was given to the club, and I hope that they remembered our visit there. It didn't last long. Here's a couple of personal observations. The contract that we signed called for 21 days at the island. That would allow us 10 to 14 days on the air. We only got 3 days at Bouvet, not 21. If not for the abort, we would have gotten on the island and made QSO. It may have been a smaller operation than originally planned, however. The engine failure was not the fault of DAP, but a contractor. Last I heard, but this is 4 or 5 years ago now, they were considering litigation against the contractor. And these are some words to live by. This is kind of my my personal mantra here. I'll just let you read it. Okay, now let's have some fun. Let's talk about some real successes. 3Y0X, this was 2006, and again, DXPedition of the year. 87,000 QSOs from the bottom of the world at the bottom of the sunspot cycle. We're very proud of that. This is the location of Peter 1. It's one of the most remote and most difficult to activate DXCC entities. It's further south than most of the Antarctic bases. And at that time, it was the number 4 most wanted entity. Now, how do you get there? Well, you fly from South America. You notice I said fly. This is a really rough part of the ocean between here and the peninsula. This is the South Shetland Islands, you see, that's where we met our boat. And then it was 5 days to Peter 1. So we left South America, took a 2-hour flight to South Shetlands, met the boat, and 5 days later, we were at Peter 1. There's a good shot of Punta Arenas. Of course, we always have lots and lots of meetings to make sure that everybody understands what their job is and understands what the possibilities or problems and what our solutions would be. Here's a picture of the aircraft. And here we are. Suddenly the weather's cooler. And that was a great shot. Everybody's got their warm stuff on now. And from here we went on a tour, saw some animals, because on Peter 1 there's no animals. There's birds, but the animals that you would want to see there can't get ashore. So if we wanted to see some elephant seals or fur seals or anything like that, we would have to do it here. There's the DAP mares. This was the first boat that they bought and refurbished. And you see we had one helicopter only. Basically, we were camping on a glacier. And that's a picture of, let me back up. That's a picture of our camp. right in the middle of that glacier. And here is one of my favorite pictures. This is the helicopter, and they're actually bringing in one of our crates. And I don't know, it just shows the whole thing. Shows the helicopter, the crates, the DAP Mayor's personnel working. Here they are, the helicopters in the upper right-hand corner. You can see it's bringing in more stuff. And we are in the process of building what I would refer to as Op B, Operating Tent B. A great shot. You'll notice the weather is pretty marginal. This is what we call the MEG. And MEG stands for meeting, eating, greeting. Another way to explain that is that maybe this would be the pool hall, you know, where everybody assembles for their meals and to shoot the bull and talk about the whole experience. And we've got it decorated with the flags of a number of nations. So the camp infrastructure was Op A, which is primarily CW, Op B, which is sideband, the MEG I mentioned, and then Sleep A had 14 cots in it. Sleep B had 7 cots in it. And then a bio collection unit, which was 1 man at a time. I'll let you figure out what that is. Oh, I'll just show you a picture of it. So this was put right outside. You can see my pointer here. This is the main entrance to Op A. I'll show you Op B here in a minute. And that was very inviting, as you might imagine. One of the sleep tents. This is the one with 14 men in it. Of course, we maintain rigid schedules. Everybody got an opportunity to operate when they wanted to operate or when we needed them to operate. And it was all very organized. And everybody was under strict order, of course, to not miss a shift. And nobody did. It's George, N4GRN, who lives here in the Atlanta area. And this is the interior of Op A, again, primarily CW. And another shot showing you what the weather is like or can be like. And there's Op B. It's probably about 600 or 700 feet up the little hill. And of course, the flags that are in the snow there are basically to give you a way to find your way from Op B to Op A or vice versa if we had a whiteout of some kind. Bad place. The stepper 2-element worked great. But it wasn't all bad weather. That's the volcano back behind. And we saw it 3 or 4 times. It's a beautiful sight. And there's a good shot of the camp with our companion iceberg in the background. So summary, 10.5 days of operations, 5 to 6 weeks away from home, 87,000 Qs, 114 moon bounce contacts, all on 2 meters, 2 contacts with the space station, 154 helicopter round trips, if you can believe that. I still can't. And thank goodness, no injuries or accidents. This is my wife just stuck her head in and I lost my train. What are we talking about here?
Are you speaking loud enough?
Maybe, I don't know. She wants to know if I'm speaking loud enough. To my, this is, well, there's two seals here. The one in the background, the darker one, is a male elephant seal. The one in the foreground is a leopard seal. Leopard seals are dangerous, particularly if you're a penguin, but also if you're a scuba diver. So we didn't do any scuba diving down there because they are very aggressive. And in fact, if you look closely around his mouth, you'll see some blood, probably an unfortunate penguin. That's a great shot. That's a whale of some kind. And that, of course, is a killer whale. That is an albatross. And that is a celebration. We're back on the boat. We are having a party. And it got a little wild, frankly, because we had been on that island for 10 or 11 days. And in fact, we had been on the boat 4 or 5 days before we got all our stuff off the island. So we're just now getting underway for the 5-day sail back to South Sandwich, or I'm sorry, South Shetland. And it was a wild night. Okay, let's move on to the second big success, the 2009. You may or may not remember in the lower left-hand corner here of the slide, you'll see the KP1 project. That is a consortium of 4 or 5 individual hams who finally got together, pooled the resources, and started working together with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to get permission to go to this shale. This used to be very common on the bands, but once Fish and Wildlife took over, they closed it to the public, and it took us 7 years to get permission to go back. 7 years. The other island we managed to activate later was K1N, Navassa. But Desert Shale was a real breakthrough with Fish and Wildlife. Our objectives were to exceed their requirements and expectations, remove KP5 from the DXCC most wanted list with 100,000 plus Qs, emphasize Europe and Asia, include general class operators, everybody gets home safely, and we're still friends. And one of the first things we did was a reconnaissance trip to the island so we could check it out. And as a result of that reconnaissance trip, we found a number of things that we wanted to change in terms of our operations plan. One of the problems and one of the excuses, if you will, that Fish and Wildlife used is that this used to be a bombing range. And they tried to convince us that there was still unexploded ordnance. And here they are looking for it. But we all had to sit through a 4 or 5 hour UXO, unexploded ordnance training session before we could go on the island. And of course, we were accompanied by Fish and Wildlife law enforcement people. They have their own set of law enforcement that they use. And these guys are pretty tough. Here we are signing the final permit. Everybody's got a little smile on their face. I certainly did. And now we're getting ready to go. That's Mike. N5U. And he was one of the organizers of the original KP15 project. Oops. We're staging here the helicopter flights to the island, the big parking lot. And here's the first 4 guys to go. And that's our destination. That is the helipad on the corner. I'm sure they'll give up here in a minute. That's the helipad on the corner of Desiceo, and that's where we're headed. Fleet tent, Desiceo Power and Light, 6,500 Generac, plenty of power. And this is the antenna layout. And as you might imagine, with any DXPedition, getting the antennas up, getting the infrastructure built, the camp, if you will, and then setting up the radios and the antennas is often a 2 or 3 day project. Now I don't know if you can see the pointer or not, but the tents with the blue tarps over them, these 2 are sleep tents. This one is the operating tent. This is the Fish and Wildlife law enforcement people in these tents. And these tents were occupied by volunteers that were there to assist with the rat eradication. In other words, the island had been overrun with rats, and part of their assignment was to try to get rid of them all. I won't explain how they did that. They wouldn't let me take any pictures. K5A and D. Now, the strategy here was to get as many people as possible onto the island and have the experience of being on the DX end. So a lot of guys were invited to go on this trip from my local club. And the idea was that at the halfway point, a number of the first group would helicopter back to Puerto Rico, and then a new group to replace them would helicopter over. And this would be, we just called it the changeover. But when the time came, there wasn't any easy way to do this. It had to be by helicopter because we were experiencing these kinds of waves. Originally, we were going to use boats, but that changed pretty quickly. The other problem was getting supplies aboard or onto the island. So we had to craft this, I'm not even sure what you'd call it, but craft this device here to swing the potatoes and the onions and the water and everything onto the island using that. Now just some good looking pictures here, I think. I'm a sunset freak, so I gotta have at least one sunset picture in there. One of the reasons that law enforcement people were on the island is that this is in the Mona Straits. And the Mona Straits, there's a lot of trafficking going on. And a lot of strange boats going by in the middle of the night. So this is one way to keep an eye on them. pretty good number. First time I think we went over 100,000. When you've got a team of 20 or 22, something like that, and you've got 6 or 8 radios and amplifiers and lots of power and everything, and you're very careful about your scheduling, you can make those kinds of QSO numbers. And I believe, and I'm not sure, but this is the first time we went over 100,000. And then we liked it so much and had so much fun, we did it. Well, I think I've got another one I could tell you about. You remember Malpelo, HK0NA? 170,000. Good numbers. And that's the QSL card. Now, this is an unusual expedition in that we didn't sleep in tents, and we took our meals in the mess hall, if you will. That was for the rest, about the 15-man crew, French crew that was on the island, and they served 13-month periods where they rotate in and out. And so this particular group was, I think somewhere in the 50s. In other words, since the French had been on this island, they had 50 groups stay for 13 months. So let's just say 60 years. And this was put together by K4UEE. At that time, Amsterdam and St. Paul were ranked number 4. All right, let's see. I think most of you probably, well, I didn't work him, but didn't need him, frankly. But that's where Crozet is located. Let me see if I can get that. Crozet, Kerguelen, and Amsterdam up here. So it really wasn't as far south as some of the other French Antarctic territories. But it was west of Australia, 2,200 miles. So right there on the vessel that we chartered was a 9-day trip and then 9 days back. So we spent 18 days on the boat, and it was a long time. Now here was our schedule. January 8th, depart VK6 land, Braveheart sails, got there, let's see, 9 days en route, 18 days on the island, 9 days back. And this is the longest that I was away, 7 weeks. This is where we met, a nice hotel in Fremantle. There's Ralph, myself, Erling, LA6VM, and this is the owner of the Braveheart, Nigel Jolly. And the local club, the VK6 club down there, threw a party for us. And this is prior to our departure. So we're all kind of getting acquainted. Nice fellas. It's time to go. There's a Braveheart. And these particular antenna supports, tower sections, were loaned to us by the VK6s. And they're aluminum and very light, yet strong. So we took them up on it. And that's what we used to mount our antennas. Give you a shot of that. This is on board. And there's Ralph and I. Ralph's on the left, and he's thinking, boy, things are really going well. And I'm on the right, I'm the treasurer on this particular expedition. And I'm thinking, how in the world are we going to pay for this? That was a joke, guys. There's a 14 AVQ I mentioned earlier. This is a famous excerpt from Tajikistan, EYEMM. Nice guy, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. The rig on board, we always have a rig on board, just for no other reason, just to make QSOs and have a little fun and kill some time. Another albatross. That may look familiar to you. I think this same guy was on the bow of the Titanic, and that didn't work out very well, if I recall. And these are the Expedition of the Year awards that that the Braveheart had been involved in. 2 men to a room. Guy on the left is VE7CT. And pretty good food. Tasty, but nothing like we were going to get when we got to the island. Calm day, beautiful day. Yeah, that's the town on Amsterdam, and you'll see some more pictures of that. That's one of the favorite pictures of me and my camera. More about that later. All right, this is the Nigel's son. These are crewmen. Well, this is a crewman. This is HK1R, who had the superstation HK1NA down in Colombia. This is UA3AB from Russia, and that's me. And we start moving stuff ashore. And these are all members of the group of French men that are stationed there, French men and women that are stationed there for the 13-month tour. More elephant seals. And that's another shot of the camp. And they had a flag for every country that was represented in our group. They looked them up on an encyclopedia or on the web or something, and made the flags. Okay, here we had 2 operating sites. I was in charge of this one, and it was the closest one down to the main camp. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, this is the camp area, and this is the location of Mataf. So here we're setting things up. The generators are inside these plastic containers. And to me, this looks like a multi station. These antennas went up in about a day and a half. That's how we transport the radios. One of the stations. You can see it's a KPA 500 there, and then a K3, and then a P3, I believe it is.
Delante mi tu è for, number 4, es Alpha 4, Foxtrot, Sierra Charlie, Roger. Ok, muchas gracias. Bye bye, bye bye. Ciao, ciao. Momento. ¡Qué estreno le dimos a la antena! ¡Wow! Me voy a dejar. Sí, Fox tratando, pai. ¡Ay, sí, la perrita! ¡Wow! Por favor!
What do you think? Was she happy to get that contact? Now let's look at the other operating site. This is a little different. Depending on what kind of shape you were in, this either took 40 minutes to climb up to the Antonelli site, or it took, in my case, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And that's the path. That's the resting point. And here's some of the antennas. This is really on the side of the hill, probably up about 1,000 feet, something like that. Nice little cabin. That's a good shot. And what we would do is, because it was a difficult walk, in the morning, a group of 4, maybe 5 sometimes, would climb up to Antonelli and then stay for 24 hours. And then they would come back and hit the sack. And another group of 4 or 5 would go up and operate for 24 hours, and so on and so forth. And if you work this on 160, you now know why. Because that thing is 90 feet tall. And it's some of the, what you see there at the bottom is the tower sections, and then you see a spider beam pole at the top. That's the extra 30 feet. The killer, just a killer. Yep, we had our own bartender. And here we are celebrating a milestone, 150,000 Qs. Before it was over, we made another 20,000. There was not just one chef, there was a chef and a sous chef. Remember, these are the French. So out of the 17 or 18 men in the crew, men and women in the crew, 2 of them were dedicated to cooking the meals. And meals they were. There was even French wine available. And this is the last night. We're celebrating, of course. And I think we've got lobster. And it was just, I mean, just a great experience. That's where we slept. Oh, did I mention that the desserts? They were available for every meal but breakfast. So we had a choice of desserts at lunch and dinner. Oh, did I mention cheese? Remember, the French. That's one reason this is one of my favorites. I gained a couple of pounds. These are some shots that were done by Nodir, EY8MM. He's quite a photographer. Great, great picture. Again, this is the last night celebration. I guess I already showed you that picture. And again, have a good trip home. Rock hopper. And that is an immature fur seal, baby fur seal. Another shot of him. And if you look carefully, I'll show you, see a lot of larger mammals. And of course, these are quite interesting. And one of the boats went out and got some good shots of them. I don't have any in the presentation. All right, that is a female. And those are the males. They can be 14 feet long. I've seen them 14 feet long, and I'm sure they were weighed at least 2,000 pounds. This is a skua, a bird of prey. And these are, can't remember at the moment, but I think they're endemic just to Amsterdam. Now, can you see up here, right there, you see that island there? That is St. Paul. Right there. Oh, there it is, better shot. Well, it's time to leave. And of course, the weather is not cooperating. Big waves, difficult to navigate, difficult to move stuff into the zodiacs and then from there onto the boat and then back. And this is kind of interesting. This is me right here. And I'm about to back onto the zodiac. And I got lots of help. But this thing was bouncing up and down and left and right and difficult. And there we are back on the boat. This fellow right here, you might know, N200. And then that's our track going back. And then we were invited to the VK6 ANC, or NC, I guess is another call sign for them. This is their club. And the club president. And we made a presentation on the DXPedition. And there's Ralph, K4UEE. And we're really proud of this, 170,140 QSOs. Amazing. And now for a shameful advertisement. I've got some DVDs that I have available. I've got 10 of them. And if you're interested in making a purchase, it's K4UEE.com/DVD. K4UEE.com/DVD. Ta-da.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. And I'm going to go ahead now, if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions,
Yeah.
go ahead and I'll try to accommodate them.
Yeah, I have a question if I can, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bob W2VG. Yeah, with the recent expedition to VP6, I think it was VP6A, the Ducey Island DXPedition, where they essentially operated remote with the problems that you had in Bouvet, as outlined earlier in your presentation. Do you see what was done at Ducey, perhaps done in the future at Bouvet and other difficult to get DXPedition locations?
Yes, I sure do. In fact, I think that's a wonderful concept. I think it's been proven now. But it would have required the helicopter to fly because there was no way to get on the island well, right now, let me back up. Right now, they've got a specially designed float or boat that they use to transport the RIG, rig in a box, RIB, I guess, to the island. And the islands that they've activated so far are islands with a sand beach. So the question is, could we figure out how to get that equipment onto the island when the cliffs are too high? You remember the picture I showed you of Peter 1?
Yeah.
Those cliffs were 300 feet tall. And many of the cliffs at Bouvet were the same. It would have been difficult. We still needed, in that case, we would have needed good weather to make at least a couple of 3 flights. And we never got it. But in the future, makes sense. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of questions. Hi, Al, K4UEE. Terrific presentation, Bob. Thank you, and thanks for all the effort to put these remote islands and places on the air. Appreciate it. Couple things. I think I read in QST there was an editorial or a comment that you get so close, like Bouvet, and you're right there on the shore. Does it make sense that perhaps credit should be given and start the operation even on the boat and consider it part of the, consider it valid? I mean, you're hundreds of feet away, and all that expense and all that effort. What is your feeling on that? To make an allowance, I guess, that if you're just offshore, that it would be a viable or creditable DXPedition.
Yeah. That's a good question. I've heard the same debate, but I don't buy it.
Okay.
And I should buy it because I've had a couple of situations where that would have made life a lot easier. But that's not the way the rules read right now. And there have been other operations where that has occurred, and the operation actually did not take place on land, but took place on boats. And they were disallowed. So
Okay.
unless the ARRL changes the rules, and I don't see them doing that, that we're kind of stuck with it. But again, we would have been a beneficiary of a new rule like that, but I'm certainly not arguing for it.
I guess it could be abused. I mean, I guess there's a case like extenuating circumstances where you just can't get on the island like all that effort. But okay, well, thank you. And
or you don't want to.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
We got
Yeah,
a
you
couple
bet.
more questions. Jay, go ahead next.
Thank you. Bob, I enjoyed your presentation. That was that's really neat trips there. So my question is power. For power that you used to, you had all those generators. How did you run those like 24/7? How much fuel did you bring? That kind of thing. And then the second part of the power question is on the different bands, how much power did you actually transmit? Did you do any low power operations? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question too. You remember Desiccio? The slides I showed you, we had, I think, 5 of those 6.5 kW gensets all lined up there. And when we first started the operation, we used them all. And then I can't remember, there was some kind of a problem that we had. It might have been running out of gas, frankly, because we needed to resupply the gas about halfway through. Anyway, we ended up running all the stations barefoot, and I think there were 8 on one generator. And you know, frankly, it was difficult to tell any difference. We were still loud, we still had a pile up. It may not have been quite as large as it had been before, but there's plenty of people to work. And then we got them gassed up again, and I think we probably got just used 2 or 3 for the rest of the expedition. But we overdid it, but I think that's probably the best way to do it. Because those things do break down sometimes, or we run out of gas. That's a great question.
Rhea, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question and a comment regarding the so there, when I was in the ARRL Programs and Services Committee, one of the things we discussed was the same thing about getting credit for, you know, ship-based operations. And that's kind of there have been arguments on both sides. One of the major issues that came up was in the case of somewhere like Scarborough Reef, where it's like disputed territory, and the actual, like China in particular, actually used DXCC status as a as part of its territorial assertion. So there had to be a lot of careful treading on that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, no, yeah. Norm Fusaro actually pointed that out to me, to the committee. So, but the other question I have, I see some of these entities that you've activated have been inactive for like 20 years. What do you think are the chances of them coming back ever?
I get that question a lot. And I've been licensed, you know, what, 65 years, something like that. And I remember Albania was off the air for a long, long time. And now it's not a most wanted any longer. Same with China. Burma has been activated. Most of them at some point in time will get activated again. That's been my experience. I've got them all. And somewhere during that 65 years, so somebody figured out how to get a license or how to get on the island or whatever. I think the chances, again, it goes down to the rules. And the rules, I used to be chairman of the DXAC, the advisory committee, and we got this question a lot. Why is so-and-so still on the list? Well, because it qualifies and because it'll be active again somehow, some way by someone. So we're not going to just, you know, monkey around with the list to because, you know, a couple of people need it or a lot of people need it. for the last one or anything like that. So again, I'm kind of a abider of the rules, if you will. And as long as they don't change, we just got to go with it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bob? Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the, Sam, you have a question? You want to unmute?
Yeah, I'm trying to, Dave.
Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. Bob, how much weight do these do your except for the one island where you had the front chef? How much weight do you guys lose?
Typically 4 or 5 pounds. I mean, it's not like we're starving to death, but you know, if you've got MREs like we had on the Vasa, and they don't taste very good, but you got to eat something, you're going to lose some weight. That's probably the best example. We've always got plenty of food. We've never run out of food, but sometimes it doesn't taste very good, or it's, you know, not very attractive. That's why I like Amsterdam so much. That's the first time I've ever gained 5 pounds. That's quite a meal, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Unbelievable.
Any other questions? And well, Bob, on behalf of MPark and NJDXA, I'd like to thank you very much for giving us this presentation. It was very informative.
Great. It's my pleasure.
All right.
It's my pleasure. I enjoy doing this, and I hope you all got a little idea of what these things are all about. I think probably the one thing that I didn't cover very much is the amount of time and effort that goes into putting one of these really rare ones on. You know, all these DXPeditions of the year were mostly in top tenors, and I just made a decision early on that if we're going to go to all this trouble, why don't we get something really rare and work hard on it, even if it takes 7 years or 9 years, and make it worthwhile, and then take a bunch of people and a bunch of radios and make a lot of cues and knock it out of the top 10. So that's kind of been my philosophy. But we're talking here about, well, I guess the extreme example would be 7 years to get K4UEE on the air, that's scale, and then another 5 to get permission to go to Nevada. That's a pretty good commitment, because it's not like you do work on it for a couple of days and then you don't work on it for a couple of months. You work on it every day. And that's not really illustrated. We're having fun here because we're seeing the results of that work. But it's tough, and I'm tired. So I just thought I'd throw that out. It's kind of hard to really explain how much time consuming these are. I appreciate the invitation.
Mm-hmm. We have one more question from Heather.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Heather.
Oh, it's not really a question. I just want to thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed your presentation. I had no idea. I mean, I'm a newer ham, so I had no idea how much work went into one of these expeditions. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. I mean, I can't imagine like all the travel and then setting everything up and take down. It's really for the adventurer, you know, and I think I'm so excited to have been the recipient of your adventures, sitting in the comfort of my house. So I thank you so much. I know Friday nights are tough to plan, but I really thank you so much for coming and doing your presentation.
Well, you've got to have a little sense of adventure to do this, and so you really nailed it, Heather. It's a combination of the radio part, the friendship part, because these teams are really close. And if there's not close, then they don't get invited back. So it's fun. It's an adventure. You're going someplace you've never been before, and you got the radio to boot. So you nailed it.
Okay, again, thank you very much. I'm
You're
going to stop
welcome.
the recording at this point.